The first California County Pension Reform Conference was held Saturday, May 10th, 2014 in San Rafael. This last panel will examine what it's like to be a candidate for office as a pension reformer.
Andrew is the Executive Director of Govern for California, and he can explain that a little bit to you. Next to Andrew is John Lowry, who's running for State Assembly. Then we've got Duff Sunheim, who's a former head of the California Republican Party, Ken Churchill, who's running for the Board of Supervisors in Sonoma. And then finally, we have Holly Madrigal, who is the current mayor of Willits, who's also a candidate now for Mendocino County Supervisors. So that's this panel.
I'm Andrew Crutchfield. I'm Director of Govern for California, a group that's focused on electing fiscally focused candidates from both parties to the state legislature and electing a farm team of local officials that eventually can become those state legislators that we desperately need. And I'd like to talk to you guys a little bit about the unique opportunity that we have as the entire legislature terms out between 2012 and 2018, and we get an entire new legislator that we'll have for 12 years. Many people like to think that the governor is the source of all power in California, that they really can't do anything without the legislator. They can stop a fair number of actions. They can't initiate really much significant action on their own, especially on fiscal issues like pensions. However, few courageous legislators can force reform. An excellent example is the open primary issue. In order to pass a budget, they needed a few Republican votes when Schwarzenegger was governor. And a couple of those Republican votes were bought off with the usual pork and jobs that I'm sure you all hear about in the legislature that gets handed out. But one state legislator, Abel Maldonado, decided to ask for an open primary, something that no one in the state legislature wanted since they'd all been elected via a closed primary. Yet he got it because they needed his vote to pass the budget. And that's provided us the system that we have today. Next slide. We have in 2012, 2014, and 2016 a lot of open seats. In 2014, there are going to be many assembly elections. There are currently 41 assembly freshmen who are elected in 2012 who will all term out in 2024 to 2026. There's currently a Democratic supermajority, and after this election, 75% of the assembly will either be freshmen or sophomore members, which shows just how long we are going to be dealing with these people and how important the 2014 election cycle is. The average assembly candidate needs around $500,000 in funds that they raise themselves to be elected. And yet again, that's not including the independent expenditures that are often necessary as well to get elected to the state legislature. In the state senate, currently there are just 2 freshmen. Most of the state senate refills itself 2014 through 2018. There's currently a Democratic supermajority, but it's been weakened by the public corruption. And thankfully. The average state senate candidate needs to raise around $1 million to be elected. This year, 23 of 80 assembly seats will be waged in open districts, which means there is no incumbent. And same thing for the state senate seats. There will be 11 of 20 that are that way. I think that we really have an opportunity this year to add some more members that are in favor of pension reform. And we'll have that same opportunity in 2016 and 2018. However, if we do not act now, those state legislators will be in office for 12 years, with only a few moving on to other jobs or to run for other offices. We've seen far fewer legislators move up from the state assembly to the state senate which used to be a major cause of turnover. Now people are staying put in the assembly for 12 years. So if we don't take advantage of the seats that we can change right now, we'll be facing more and more difficult elections as time goes on. So I just urge you all to remain focused on the state legislator. It's incredibly important to the cause of pension reform, and I think we have a chance to make some real changes.
Thanks, Andrew. Before we go to the three candidates, Duff, been the head of the California Republican Party. I've been here, of course, all day. It just seems to me that one of the positives that may come out of this is that if we're going to solve this problem, there's going to be a recognition that pension liability is not a Republican problem, it's not a Democratic problem, it's not an independent problem, it's not a libertarian problem, it's not a vegetarian's problem, it's everybody's problem. And how do we, I'm a Republican, I'll admit it, I'm going to hell anyway, so I'll tell you all, I might as well. I may accelerate the trip, but, I'm going. Hi, Mom. How do we engage as Republicans in this conversation without being branded in such a way that our good faith to try to reach a reasoned solution is not automatically challenged and dismissed out of hand?
Well, let me take a step back from that. First of all, I love coming to these things, one, because I learn a lot, but two, it reinforces that the real solution to our problems lies with the people. And I'm really impressed by the people that are on the podium that are our elected officials, and just think of how much time and energy they give, how much time and energy all of you give. I'm working on education reform in San Jose this week, work with some people in the work that they're doing on a volunteer basis. So, we're talking about problems and big problems and existential problems, but what really gives me faith is the quality of the people. I mean, if you think about all the things that have been said today, how many things did you think were said that were just outrageous or said for political motivation? They were all sincerely felt, and they were all sincerely dealing with the issue. And that's what gives me a lot of confidence. So I was, as Michael mentioned, I was chair of the California Republican Party from 2003 to 2007. I got involved shortly before the recall. And my mentor is a man by the name of George Schultz, who always told me, the problem in politics is not that people think too big, is that they don't think big enough. And so really what he taught me to do is go after the big issues and the big strategies. So when I sat down with him about 2002, the concept was, okay, to get a Republican in there as governor and then have him do reform efforts that were had bipartisan appeal. And at the same time then push for open primary, push for redistricting and workers' comp, and find things that address the issues that could bring together new coalitions. And so the concept with pension reform is that, as you saw, the leader of the statewide effort is a Democratic mayor. And the Democrats that are supporting us, as those Democrats that are out there, they're paying a real price for their support of the pension reform issue. The people that are focusing on education reform are paying a real price because the teachers union are really coming after those people. So what the concept was is to find people across the spectrum that care about the issues. And because of the open primary, what was after your name, whether it's an R&D, wouldn't mean as much as where do you stand on pension reform, as Linda said. That was something that became a key issue. And for the pension reform group, education work, where do you stand? Are you with the teachers or are you with the kids? Those are the types of things that we need to do. And as Republicans, my perspective was we were way too guilty of stopping things. We were way too guilty of not, no new taxes, rather than, okay, we want to help you achieve your goal for your family. And that's why I spent a lot of time in minority communities saying, okay, we're here to help you because we know you're just as committed to living the American dream as anybody else. So breaking it down to your specific question, I think what we do too much as Republicans is that we take this kind of philosophical approach to problems. And my view is, since I spend a lot of time in people that just have their nose above the waterline, it's like we're up on this ship, the American dream, and there are all these people that are swimming to us. A lot of them have literally crossed oceans to come to America because of the American dream. And we're up there like with a bullhorn going, okay, Jose, you're doing pretty good, but you got to get your right elbow up a little higher, right? It's philosophical. It's, no new taxes. It's not focusing on, you know what, if we don't reduce our pensions, you're not going to have the type of police services that you need in your community. You're not going to have the types of schools that you need. You're not going to have the types of roads that you need. So really what we need to do is, yes, there is a philosophy that undergirds it. And what Schultz really taught me about Reagan is he spent weeks, months, years writing all these thoughts down, but he was able to condense it in a way that connected with the people. One interesting thing, Reagan never used the word conservative because he felt it was splitting things up ideologically. Reagan's concept is it's not right versus left, it's the status quo versus the future. And what we have to do is we have to show that we're the party of the future, that we care about the issues that matter to the individual. So that's just kind of the framework in which we're trying to work on the pension stuff and other reform efforts as well.
Thank you for that. John, I want to turn to you. John, if I understand this correctly, you're a Democrat, is that right?
I'm a Democrat and a fellow Long Islander.
And a fellow Long Islander. So as a Democrat on your way to heaven, I wonder if there's a Republican heaven. I don't know.
I'm sure there is.
Is there? I'm glad to hear that. Maybe you could say a good word for me. You're a Democrat. You're running, and you're not afraid to say that you're a pension reformer, I assume.
That's true.
How is that impacting your ability to reach out to the quote-unquote natural constituency or predictable constituency, if I can use all of these stereotypical concepts? And what does that do to your ability to raise the $500,000, which is the number, right, Andrew, but on average that you need?
Well, I am a long way from $500,000, but I have raised some money, and some of it has come from Republicans as well, Republicans and people who are declined to state, and Democrats, of course. And I think it took me a while to define what my campaign was going to look like, and to what extent I could reach into the sort of organized Democratic constituency. And I had to finally realize I wasn't really going to reach very far into the organized Democratic constituency. I had some interviews with public employees unions, and of course didn't go anywhere. I had the experience of them just not returning my calls when I called. So I said, well, I kind of thought this was what was going to happen, and that my campaign would be focused on my being pragmatic and you might say, I'm trying to think of my other word, pragmatic, moderate candidate, and that I would look to people who saw things the way I do, because I think that really there is a majority constituency there that is not excited about the pension situation, and is not controlled by any interest group, Democratic Party, or any interest groups anywhere for that matter. So I'm looking for independent and pragmatic people. And my background is in housing. I ran a nonprofit housing company in Sonoma County, Burbank Housing. I was the executive director I was there for 28 years, but I was the ED for 15 years. We were very successful. We built about 3,500 homes and apartments that were affordable to low-income people. And so I had the experience of pursuing a kind of public purpose that you might associate more with Democrats, but at the same time I was running a business. And I became connected with the business community. I began to see things the way business sees things, and I felt that that was the reason why, when I finished at Burbank, I retired in 2012, that I wanted to take this further, this perspective, which I called independent and pragmatic, and talk to everybody, to independents, to Democrats, Republicans. Pension fits right inside of that because, or is part of this, because I'm very concerned with the things that were cut out of the budget in the financial crisis. I'd like to see restoration of funding to education, human services, infrastructure, and we're not going to be able to restore those cuts because we have pension obligations. The governor pretty much said that. That was going to be his position, at least. I agree with his approach to the rainy day fund. I thought when he talked about using a lot of the funding that would come from capital gains taxes, since they're so volatile, that they were a good source in good times, that those should go into the rainy day fund. I'm entirely supportive of that. But then he went on to say, and we're going to use new revenue to pay down debt and address unfunded obligations. Well, of course, he was talking about the pension. So in a way, the pensions, I fear, pension obligations are going to suck up the funding for the types of restoration of services that I would like to see. So as a matter of fact, I talked about amending the Constitution even before I had even heard of Chuck Reed. And then when I heard about it, I said, wow, somebody's actually doing it. This is great. So I was very much a proponent of that. Very disappointed that it wasn't on the 2014 ballot, and so I will be supportive of that as a way to stabilize the obligation. Now, of course, even if it does get passed, and even if most governments make use of it, we still have a tremendous obligation out there that will challenge our ability to expand services and probably require increased taxation, even in the best case.
Right.
But we do need to look at getting a hold of it, getting it stable sooner than later, and then moving ahead with the other priorities that we have for our public funding.
If you could, thank you very much for that, John. If you'd pass the microphone down to Holly.
This is an election year, so you might want to give us time limits.
Holly, one of the things that I think candidates sometimes are hit with when you are not an elected official is these matters are so complicated, and I've had so much experience, and I've been in these positions, and I've been a leader, and I've done all of this stuff. Well, you're currently a mayor, and now you're running for a Board of Supervisor position. Do you feel that does give you a competitive advantage by being able to say, I've had this job and I've served the public and now I'm prepared to go to the next job? How does that play out in your view?
Well, somewhat. I'm currently the mayor of Willits. We're about 5,000 people or so. We're actually the next stoplight after San Francisco on Highway 101. And that honor was given to us by Cloverdale, but that's another story.
Holly, the moderator gets all the jokes, okay?
Sorry. With the city of Willits, we're part of the CalPERS situation. So the county of Mendocino is so drastically different as far as this issue in some ways. So to answer that question, yes, my almost 10 years of experience is helpful, but at the same time, it feels like a new animal when it comes to being part of the 21 counties. I mean, it's really a different structure. But I would love to talk just briefly about a couple of things under my time. So I'm running for office in a very small rural county. We really do relationship politics. It matters less what party you're in and more really about who you're talking to at the grocery store and what personal endorsements you have. We have a very, when I hear the numbers that you need to, run for assembly or senate, it's sort of staggering to me who, if I get 3,000 votes, I'll have this election wrapped up in June. I mean, there's a bit more than 10,000 registered voters in our 3rd district, and only like maybe 5,000 people vote in the primary. I mean, we're talking some abysmal numbers. So really engaging the public is a huge issue. So I just want to bring it down to our level that, I'm talking about like $10,000 for the primary and 20,000 maybe for the whole gambit, but we'll see how that goes. I am endorsed by SEIU, and they are really not happy that I am here. I just want to be really candid about this. And the fact is that I don't see a way forward with reform without having public employees on board. I don't see how that's going to happen. And the fact that I risk this endorsement is sort of emblematic of that. By being here and learning, I thought we had a really productive session earlier in the day. I learned a lot of things. I don't agree with everything, but by having that conversation, it's just so important in order to be able to move forward. But when I was speaking with our local leadership, they feel like, because basically I said, listen, we need to have a seat at the table. We need to make sure that the employees are being represented in this, because as the costs just continue to skyrocket, the public employee is what's going to get thrown under the bus, is my sense of that. And so we need to have a seat at the table. And their point of view was, but this is the wrong table. This is not, they're worried that I'd be giving the movement credibility, by being here, and, that I could be potentially being used as a pawn in this process. So I think that that's something that's really important that we need to address. Dan Jurdy mentioned this a little bit. The outlook for the public employees in Mendocino County is abysmal. The morale is through the floor. I mean, it's hard to describe. We're talking about some of these, deluxe pensions, but we have county employees that are eligible for food stamps. So let's think about that. We are not a high wealthy county. And when I have these conversations, I just come back to the fact that I am the best candidate for the employees. So that's the conversations that I'm having. How to properly represent them in a campaign, but yet be able to have these conversations about how we're going to be able to move forward as a county. Because if we do not have reforms or do not look for solutions or even refuse to talk about that, then we're not going to be able to stand behind our commitment to pay their pensions. That's really my biggest fear, is that County of Mendocino will go bankrupt and I'll be sitting in that chair being like, oh, sorry about that. I also just want to add that in Mendocino County, the most egregious violations were not on the behalf of the employees. I feel like the most egregious violations had to do with the retirement board, and this is no comment, Ted, on your service on our board, but that it's the leadership and the governing of the pension funds that's really some of the most egregious trespasses have been done on that level, on the Board of Supervisors level, on the retirement board level. So I also shy away from blaming too much. And I am really curious, we've sort of nibbled around the edges on this, but if you're comfortable saying that you're a Democrat or a progressive left-leaning person, does anyone feel brave enough to raise their hand? Just out of curiosity? Yeah, Democrat or... I think that's important, and we did this earlier in our session earlier, and it was about 50-50. There's a real fear, I think, from the employee side that I've drunk the right-wing Kool-Aid and I'm, that nothing beneficial could come out of this process. I just wanted to mention a couple other things as far as where we go from here. As a candidate, it's really challenging without accurate numbers, accurate information. The employees feel like the county is not being upfront with them, that the budgetary information is not legitimate and they don't trust it. I, as a resident, have a hard time trusting the numbers that are coming out of the retirement board. Just for example of this, our citizens group presented a set of questions to the Board of Supervisors, and sort of as part of that presentation with us giving these questions, the county and basically had a presentation about the state of the pension fund from the county's perspective. And there was a gentleman from Raymond James there that was giving that report, and it was a very rosy report. Basically, they said that the impact of the new GASB rules, Mendocino County is going to be fine. Our pension is fine. And so how do you, as a elected leader or as a candidate, either way, how do you make reasonable, wise policy when you do not have numbers that you can trust? Our citizens group has sort of come up with this idea that, this is sort of like a 12-step program. The first step is admitting you have a problem. Honestly, that is the stage that we're at, admitting that we have a problem. I feel like there is an acknowledgement on the Board of Supervisors, an acknowledgement by the majority that there is a problem, but yet we're still dickering about what that actually is. What is the actual rate of return, not just for a couple of years that look good, but going back? And if we're not, if our target is consistently higher than what we're able to get, how are we going to deal with that? Because it's structured to fail, and that is not doing the proper duty to the employees. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm happy to have this conversation and hear from other folks. And yeah, I'm sure I'll have more to say.
And speaking of hearing from other folks, I didn't want to leave out Ken, but I did want to say, Holly, thanks for your courage in being here, and thanks for your candor in sharing that. This is tough stuff. And I guess I'm curious, Ken, after listening to Holly, are you still sure that you want to run for the Board of Supervisors? And, I'm not prying, but you're obviously a successful guy, and you kind of need this, like maybe you need a hole in the head. So what motivated you to do this? It's clearly not the glory. It's clearly not because it's easy decision making. I don't know, maybe you're running unopposed, but I don't think so.
I wish.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, so I'm kind of the reform leader of Sonoma County. I've started an organization called New Sonoma, and I wrote a lot of reports about our pension crisis, and I saw where we were going, and I saw how far our county had fallen financially, and I retired to Sonoma County in 1999, thinking. I sold it. My wife and I had a successful environmental consulting business in the Bay Area. We sold it, and I thought I was just going to live out my days on a nice little ranch with a vineyard and grow wine grapes and live happily ever after. And then about 5 years ago, I picked up the newspaper, and it said that the supervisors had decided to abandon pavement preservation on 86% of our roads. And I was like, well, that's not going to work. I'm out here in the middle of the county. How am I going to get from A to B? And I started looking into why they would make such a ridiculous decision, and it soon led me to pensions. And so I just kind of started digging deeper and deeper. I guess the answer is I just don't see any solutions. Our Board of Supervisors approaches pension reform like it was radioactive. I've tried to work really hard with them. I've pointed out to them that we actually illegally increased our pensions back in 2002 without the required public disclosure, without the required annual actuarial study. And a lot of people asked me about running, and it was finally Carol Deniston who was up here a little earlier, and I asked her what she thought I should do, and her response was, if people like you don't run, this will never get solved. And that was kind of the final decision for me, was to get involved. And I was a long shot. I would say it was a really long shot. I'm one of 5 candidates, and one candidate owes the IRS $1.5 million, and so he's going to have a little problem. Another candidate is kind of just threw his hat in the ring, but isn't really running much of a campaign. Another one is a guy that just showed up a year ago in the county, and so that's kind of just come out. So he's going to have a problem, I think, with that. And the other one is a woman who's on the city council who's got a lot of baggage, I think, but she's got the union endorsements and money behind her. And basically, I'm funding my campaign with donations I get from friends and folks, and matching it with my own money. And I'll probably spend $50,000 to $60,000 on the primary. And today was a really good day for me. This morning I woke up and picked up the paper, and I was endorsed by the Press Democrat newspaper. So, and then at lunch, Mayor Reed endorsed me. So.
And at 4:30, I endorsed you. So I mean,
There was a question from the audience that wasn't audible in the video. It was something to the effect that the audience member felt that the public employee unions were throwing their weight around politically far beyond what was a legitimate exercise of the union's function. And the individual felt that, to some extent, the totality of public employees were gaining a very unfair benefit by the political power of the unions themselves. And here's some responses.
just to give a little bit of pushback, the fact of the matter is that California is a non-right to work state. People are required to pay dues, condition of employment. For many of the individuals that are represented by the union, I suspect that they pay very little attention to the union leadership. I suspect that they're doing it just because they need to have a job. There's a very, very important decision that will come down from the United States Supreme Court between now and the end of June, Harris versus Quinn, that deals with whether or not public employees have an automatic First Amendment right not to make contributions to the union, which then in turn the union uses for political purposes. There's probably a 5-4 split on that. So I think that we have to be very, very, very careful. I'm sort of becoming a panelist, and I'll shut up in a second, but I think we have to be very, very careful when we start talking about the whole group of public sector employees. I would suspect that most of them have very little to do with the union leadership. We know that in the private sector, about 60 to 65% of the union membership disagrees with their leadership when it comes to political questions in general. I think we clearly know that there are some people that have abused the pension system, that are getting the $200,000, the $300,000, the $400,000, the Jack Dean $100,000 club. But most of those individuals are in managerial positions. They're not the hourly workers. And to a great extent, those hourly workers are being abused by those union leaders and those officials, quite frankly, in my humble view. But what do you guys have to say about that?
I was going to basically concur with a lot of that. The folks that I'm talking to in the 3rd District are rank and file people. We had a similar health care, retiree health benefit, I'll just say shenanigan, because that's probably the cleanest word I can come up for it, where the rank and file employees did not realize that there was a problem until the day the Board of Supervisors said, we're not going to be able to do this anymore. And what happened in our county is that through the excess earnings, Ponzi scheme, I don't even know what to call, the excess earnings rationale, that they would use the excess earnings to pay for retiree health care. So my predecessors on the Board of Supervisors, they made a commitment and then did nothing to actually fund it. They actually raided the pension funds for that. I don't believe that any of the union members that I know would have supported that if they had been aware of it. But the fact is that we've all failed as far as the accountability. Government leaders have failed because we either didn't fully understand what we were saying we were doing, or didn't understand the full ramifications to our services about what was being offered, but also, the retirement board failed because they okayed this. Multiple actuaries said that it was fine, and the Board of Supervisors failed because, same thing. They offered things that they had no intention, or maybe they did have intentions. I don't know. But largely, the rank and file and the average citizen in Mendocino County is not as aware of this as they could be.
And I think what we're going to do is I'm going to make a comment and ask the panelists to make a concluding comment. Then John's going to come up and wrap so that you can go home and really celebrate Mother's Day, and seriously, happy birthday, but happy Mother's Day. But there's another failure. I failed. I'm a fairly intelligent individual. I make a very good living, and I have a very nice life. And I failed. Because up until 3 years ago, I made an assumption that the people that I voted for knew what they were doing and that I didn't have to watch over them. I failed. So the failure goes to every level. But at the end of the day, the success is going to come because we don't have a room of 150, or we had 200 at the peak, but because we have a room of 10,000 or 20,000 or 30,000 thoughtful individuals who say, we're tired of failing. So that's my concluding comment. What's yours?
Yeah, actually, I blame the management, and what really makes me angry about all of this is that even our supervisors do this, and that is they don't tell the employees the truth about the situation. When they go to their retirement association meetings, and if you read the printed information, this whole problem doesn't have anything to do with retroactive benefit increases. We would be fine if the stock market hadn't fallen. So that's just what they're told. When I go to listen to the Board of Supervisors, they'll say, we're 80% funded in our pension system. And I say, well, only because $600 million worth of taxpayers' money went into it to make it 80%. You take that out, you're 57% funded. They lie. They don't tell us the truth about the finances, and I think that, the rank and file people hear that, even from the supervisors, and that's what we got to change. I think that the people really need to be honest with these people about what's going on. And regarding the READ initiative, I talked to a lot of people, and a very, very good friend of mine is the county auditor, and I'm sorry, the county assessor. And I was talking to him about the READ initiative, which I probably assumed he was worried about or was opposed to. And I said, Bill, who's probably going to retire in the next 5 years, I said, so here's what the READ initiative does. It just allows the the county to change benefits going forward for existing employees. So if you're retired and the system is running into financial stress, would you not want the system to be able to change the benefits going forward to protect the benefits you've already earned? And it's not going to affect your benefits because it protects them. And he had to kind of shake his head, what's he going to say? So a lot of it is I think the senior union people, they should not, I think when all said and done, you're going to see a lot of people embracing the READ initiative that work for the county. And I also say that Gina Raimondo, who's who took on pension reform in Rhode Island, 60% of the union workers voted for her for treasurer. So I don't think necessarily, and what she did is she said, let's not blame each other. This is a math problem we've got to solve together. And that's how she approached it, as a math problem. Leave the politics at the door. Don't blame. Let's throw all the options out on the table. Let's hire independent experts to tell us what does each of those options save, and make intelligent decisions. And that's what really we need to do, I think.
Well, I'll be real quick. I think that keeping down the level of rancor is important and particularly important in this situation, although sometimes you need to speak clearly and assertively. I was at a meeting, it was in Mendocino County, where some workers came in and made a presentation about how there were only 2/3 as many of them as there were, and they hadn't gotten any pay raises. And I thought, well, these people actually might be interested in talking about where the money's going. So I think there is some common ground to speak with them. You know, I just got off track just for a quick minute. I wanted to say that I was also endorsed. I actually use the word recommended by the Press Democrat, and our paper in Santa Rosa takes this issue very, very seriously, and they've been working on this for quite a while, and that's why they endorsed us. But I was really very pleased to receive that. Also, I just want to tell you, I left a little bit of campaign information, my cards over on the table, if you'd like to look at that. Thanks a lot.
I'd just like to end by describing what we've seen in all the polling we've done for our candidates that we've supported on pension reform. Cutting employees' benefits, no matter how outrageous they are, doesn't poll well. People don't like to take things away from people, and ultimately, even in the most egregious circumstances, the lower income employees aren't getting the largest pension at the end of the day. The problem is that they paid nothing for it. What is positive and what works very well in polling across all political parties is talking about the services that are in jeopardy. Regardless of if you care about environmental protection, CSUs and UCs, keeping your taxes low, all of those things are in jeopardy. And so focusing the messaging on the services that are in jeopardy and the sheer amount of money that we will save from pension reform and all of the, sort of pie in the sky things we could do with it if we weren't wasting it on an unsustainable pension plan. So I think that that's the way to message it, regardless of whether or not the employees are to blame for this issue.